History has always been written by the powerful, by kings, generals, and rulers. But what if I told you that in the 21st century, history is no longer written only in palaces and parliaments, but in hashtags? What began as a simple symbol on a keyboard has become the rallying cry of revolutions, the voice of the silenced, and the heartbeat of global movements. From the streets of Cairo during the Arab Spring to the hashtag #MeToo storm that shook the world, from Black Lives Matter to climate strikes, hashtags have become the ink with which ordinary people are writing extraordinary history. This is not just technology. This is a story of how a digital symbol transformed into a weapon of change. Welcome to the age where history trends. Throughout human history, people have always found ways to raise their voices against injustice, oppression, and inequality. Long before the age of social media and hashtags, activism had its own language, its own tools, and its own battles. To understand the rise of hashtag activism, we must first travel back in time and trace the roots of how ordinary people made themselves heard in extraordinary circumstances. In the 16th century, when the printing press transformed Europe, pamphlets and handbills became the earliest weapons of social change. Martin Luther's 95 Theses, nailed to a church door in Wittenberg in 1517, was not just a theological protest. It was one of the earliest examples of how a simple text could spread like wildfire, igniting a movement that shook the foundations of Europe. For the first time in history, ideas could move faster than armies. Knowledge was no longer confined to scholars and priests. It was in the hands of the people, and with it came the power to resist. As centuries passed, the spirit of activism adapted to new technologies. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the pamphlet evolved into the newspaper. During the American and French revolutions, newspapers and broadsheets carried stories of freedom and resistance across cities and villages. Revolutionaries used the printed word not just to inform but to inspire, building a sense of shared struggle that crossed borders. Words became weapons, and narratives became the battlefield. By the 20th century, the rise of radio and television reshaped activism yet again. The human voice could now reach millions at once. Consider Mahatma Gandhi in India, who used newspapers and speeches to mobilize millions against British colonial rule. Or Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States, whose televised speeches and marches became immortal moments in the civil rights struggle. The message was clear. Technology and activism were inseparable, each new tool giving voice to those who had been silenced before. But it wasn't just leaders who shaped history. It was also the power of the collective. Strikes, protests, marches, and boycotts were all forms of activism that relied on spreading information. Flyers handed out in factories, posters pasted on walls, slogans painted on streets. All of them served the same purpose: to connect people through a shared cause. Activism was not only about confrontation, it was about communication. Then came the late 20th century, when the world began to shrink under the weight of globalization. Fax machines, phone calls, and 24-hour news cycles gave activists new speed. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was not just a political event. It was a moment where television cameras carried images of freedom to every corner of the globe. South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle found global support as images of protests and speeches traveled beyond borders, uniting people who had never even set foot on African soil. What is important to understand here is that activism has always been tied to technology. From the printing press to television, every new form of communication expanded the reach of those fighting for justice. Every new medium gave the powerless a louder voice. Yet, until the dawn of the internet, activism was still bound by geography, by the limits of physical space. Protests required bodies in the streets. Movements required leaders to guide them. Change took time, often decades. But history was about to turn a new page. As the 21st century began, a new tool emerged, one faster, more accessible, and more connected than anything that had come before. The internet, and eventually social media, would revolutionize activism in ways the world had never seen. Where pamphlets once took weeks to circulate, a single tweet could now reach millions in seconds. Where marches once required months of planning, a hashtag could create instant solidarity across continents. Hashtag activism did not appear out of nowhere. It was the latest chapter in a long story. The story of human resistance, shaped and strengthened by the tools of its time. From Luther's theses to Gandhi's Salt March, from King's dream to the chants in Tahrir Square, the essence of activism has always been the same: to turn silence into speech, to turn despair into action, and to turn individuals into a movement. This is where our journey into #activism begins. Not in the digital age itself, but in the centuries of struggle that laid the foundation. The hashtags we see trending today are the descendants of pamphlets, newspapers, speeches, and marches. They carry the same spirit, the same defiance, and the same hope that words, when united, can change the world. The 21st century brought with it a revolution that no one fully anticipated. The internet, once a tool for academics and hobbyists, began reshaping the very fabric of human interaction. With the rise of social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube in the early 2000s, communication became instant, borderless, and personal. Activism, too, adapted to this new frontier. The tools of protest were no longer just posters, leaflets, or marches. They were tweets, posts, and viral videos. In 2007, something simple yet revolutionary appeared on Twitter: the hashtag. Originally designed as a way to categorize conversations, the hashtag soon became much more than a symbol. It became a rallying cry, a unifying thread that bound strangers together around a single idea. For the first time in history, millions of people could participate in the same conversation, no matter where they were in the world. A hashtag was short, sharp, and powerful. It was activism condensed into a single line of text. The first great test of this new digital weapon came in 2011 with the Arab Spring. Across Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and beyond, ordinary people used Twitter and Facebook to organize protests, share information, and bypass government-controlled media. Images of Tahrir Square in Cairo, filled with thousands of voices demanding freedom, spread across the globe in real time. The world watched history unfold not through newspapers or television anchors, but through the tweets of protesters on the ground. For many, it was the first realization that social media had changed activism forever. At the same time, other movements began to rise. In 2011, the slogan, "We are the 99%," spread through Occupy Wall Street in New York. What started as a protest against economic inequality soon became a global conversation, thanks to hashtags like #OccupyWallStreet. Though the physical encampments were cleared, the language of the movement lived on, shaping debates about wealth and power in the 21st century. The real breakthrough, however, came with movements that spoke to the heart of social justice. In 2013, after the acquittal of George Zimmerman and the killing of Trayvon Martin, 3 women, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi, created the hashtag Black Lives Matter. What began as a phrase of grief and outrage grew into one of the most powerful civil rights movements of modern history. Through hashtags, ordinary citizens documented police brutality, shared stories of injustice, and demanded accountability. No longer could such events be hidden or dismissed. The world was watching, in real time, through the eyes of those directly affected. This was the birth of what came to be known as #activism. Unlike traditional activism, which often required physical presence and organizational structures, #activism thrived on decentralization. It did not need a single leader. It did not wait for permission. A single post could spark a movement. A single hashtag could unite millions. It was democracy in its rawest digital form. Critics, however, were quick to call it slacktivism, the idea that liking, sharing, or tweeting was a lazy substitute for real action. And yet, history shows that these small acts of online solidarity often led to larger mobilizations in the real world. The Women's March of 2017, one of the largest protests in U.S. history, was organized largely through hashtags and social media. Millions took to the streets across continents, proving that online energy could spill over into physical activism. By the mid-2010s, hashtags had become the global language of resistance. Hashtag Bring Back Our Girls drew attention to the kidnapping of schoolgirls in Nigeria. Hashtag G Sweet Charlie expressed solidarity after the Paris attacks. Hashtag MeToo gave millions of women the courage to speak out against harassment and abuse. Each movement proved that a hashtag was more than a trend. It was a digital banner carried by millions, a way to transform isolated voices into a global chorus. But why did hashtags work so powerfully? The answer lies in history itself. From the pamphlets of the Reformation to the newspapers of revolutions, activism has always relied on the simplest, most accessible tools to spread ideas. In the digital age, the hashtag became the pamphlet of the people. It was easy to use, impossible to control, and capable of spreading across the world in seconds. In a way, it was the most democratic tool activism had ever known. By the end of the decade, the hashtag had cemented its place in history. Governments began to fear it, corporations began to study it, and activists began to wield it like a weapon. The hashtag had grown from a mere symbol into a powerful instrument of historical change. As the story of hashtag activism unfolds, one thing becomes clear. It did not replace traditional activism. It transformed it. Just as the printing press once changed how revolution spread, just as television once brought marches into living rooms, hashtags gave the world a new stage, a new megaphone, a new battlefield. And in this battlefield, words once again carry the power to challenge empires, topple systems, and rewrite history. The power of activism has always rested in numbers. One voice can be silenced, a few can be ignored, but when millions speak together, the sound becomes impossible to contain. In earlier centuries, these numbers were bound by geography. Marches filled streets, strikes shook industries, and revolutions consumed nations. But in the 21st century, with the birth of social media and the rise of hashtags, numbers took on an entirely new meaning. A single message amplified by countless shares could unite voices across continents, across cultures, across languages. For the first time in human history, activism had no borders. The Arab Spring had already shown the world what was possible. Protesters in Cairo, Tunis, and Tripoli not only inspired each other, but also inspired people oceans away. Young activists in Spain watched Egypt's Tahrir Square and launched their own protest against austerity. Demonstrators in New York's Occupy movement adopted chants and strategies from Tunisia. A digital echo was born. An uprising in one corner of the world resonated in another. Global voices were beginning to unite. But perhaps no movement demonstrated this more powerfully than the rise of hashtag #MeToo. The phrase was originally coined in 2006 by activist Tarana Burke to support survivors of sexual violence. But it exploded into a global phenomenon in 2017 after actress Alyssa Milano encouraged women to share their stories using the hashtag. Within hours, millions of posts flooded social media from women across every continent. Stories that had been buried in silence for decades erupted into the open. The power of hashtag #MeToo lay not in its leaders, because it had none, but in its participants. Women in Hollywood, students in India, workers in Africa, professionals in Europe, all shared the same digital stage. Survivors who once felt isolated discovered they were part of a global community. From movie studios to parliaments, from classrooms to corporate boardrooms, the voices of ordinary women created a historic reckoning. What began as a hashtag became a worldwide movement, rewriting the narrative of gender and power. The same phenomenon unfolded with other causes. The kidnapping of 276 Nigerian schoolgirls by Boko Haram in 2014 could have been just another tragedy hidden in the shadows of global indifference. But the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls changed everything. From local Nigerian activists, the call spread to international leaders, celebrities, and ordinary citizens. Michelle Obama held a placard. Millions tweeted in solidarity. Governments were pressured to respond. For the families of the kidnapped girls, the hashtag was not just a symbol. It was proof that the world was listening. This global chorus did not just amplify tragedies. It reshaped solidarity itself. In 2015, when terrorists attacked the offices of Charlie Hebdo in Paris, the hashtag Je suis Charlie united millions in defense of freedom of speech. In moments of grief, outrage, or resistance, hashtags offered people a way to express unity instantly. They transcended borders in a way marches never could. While a protest might gather tens of thousands in one city, a hashtag could gather millions across nations within hours. The phenomenon of global voices uniting through hashtags also carried a deeper historical lesson. Just as revolutions in the 19th century were inspired by one another, France inspiring uprisings in Europe, Russia's revolution inspiring movements across the world. Digital revolutions now inspired each other faster and louder than ever before. Activism had entered an age of simultaneity. What happened in one place could belong to everyone, everywhere, all at once. Of course, with such immense power came new challenges. When voices from across the world joined under one hashtag, differences of context and culture sometimes clashed. A slogan born in one country could carry unintended meanings in another. Yet, even with these differences, the unifying force was undeniable. People were no longer alone in their struggles. They were part of a collective narrative, a global history of resistance being written in real time. Consider how Black Lives Matter, which began in the United States, inspired protests far beyond American borders. Marches erupted in London, Paris, Berlin, Sydney, and Johannesburg. The hashtag connected stories of police brutality and racial injustice from across the globe, transforming a local movement into a universal struggle against systemic inequality. The same way Gandhi's Salt March inspired oppressed people beyond India, or King's Dream inspired freedom struggles across continents, hashtags gave movements a global audience that previous generations of activists could only dream of. But the most profound impact of global voices united under hashtags is not just their size, it is their permanence. Unlike marches that fade or speeches that echo only once, digital activism leaves behind a permanent archive. Each post, each tweet, each image becomes part of history's memory. Future historians will not just read about revolutions in books. They will scroll through the very words of those who lived them. The hashtags we use today are tomorrow's historical documents, capturing the raw emotion of entire generations. This is why hashtag activism is not merely a trend. It is a historical transformation, placing power in the hands of ordinary people at a scale unimaginable in the past. For the first time, the powerless can reach the powerful without intermediaries, without delay, without silence. Global voices are united not in a single city square, but in the endless digital square of the internet, where billions can gather at once. As history shows, unity has always been the greatest weapon of change. From peasants marching against kings to workers striking against empires, collective action has toppled the mighty and rewritten the fate of nations. Today, that unity is not limited by distance or time zones. A girl in Nigeria, a woman in America, a student in Pakistan, a worker in France, all can speak together at the same moment with the same words. And in that collective voice lies the greatest power of our age, the ability to turn isolated struggles into global movements, to turn hashtags into history. The story of activism has never been one of smooth victories. Every wave of progress has been met with resistance, every voice of protest with attempts to silence it. The age of hashtag activism is no different. For all its power to unite voices and ignite change, it has also drawn fierce backlash from governments, corporations, and even society it seeks to transform. To understand the full story, we must explore not only the triumphs of hashtag activism, but also the struggles it faces against manipulation, suppression, and doubt. History reminds us that this is nothing new. In the 18th century, revolutionary newspapers were censored by monarchs. In the 20th century, authoritarian regimes tightly controlled radio and television, fearing that free speech would inspire rebellion. Likewise, in the 21st century, governments realized that hashtags pose a unique threat. They were uncontainable. Unlike a march that could be dispersed with force, a hashtag could travel across borders instantly, beyond the reach of police or censors. The result was a new kind of struggle, a digital cat-and-mouse game between activists and those in power. During the Arab Spring, many governments attempted to shut down social media entirely. Egypt's regime famously cut off the internet in 2011, hoping to suffocate the protests in Tahrir Square. Yet the blackout only drew global outrage, and activists found other ways to connect. VPNs, satellite connections, and even old-fashioned word-of-mouth kept the movement alive. The attempt to silence the digital square revealed just how powerful it had become. But backlash came not only from governments. Hashtags themselves became battlegrounds. Powerful groups quickly learned that the same tools that could amplify justice could also spread disinformation. Bots, trolls, and propaganda campaigns began flooding hashtags with false messages, trying to drown out genuine voices. Movements like Black Lives Matter or #MeToo often face organized efforts to discredit them, painting them as dangerous, divisive, or illegitimate. This weaponization of hashtags raises a haunting question. If the digital square belongs to everyone, then who controls the truth within it? Unlike a physical protest, where you can see the bodies in the streets, the digital world is more fragile. A single hashtag can be hijacked, manipulated, or twisted. The very openness that gives hashtags their power also makes them vulnerable. Criticism also came from within society. Skeptics labeled hashtag activism as slacktivism, accusing participants of doing nothing more than clicking a button. They argued that posting a hashtag was not the same as real activism, that it was a shallow performance rather than a commitment to change. And in some cases, this criticism held truth. There were indeed moments when hashtags trended for a few days and then faded, leaving little lasting impact. The fear was that activism had become a fleeting spectacle, more about visibility than victory. Yet history again provides perspective. Every form of activism has been criticized in its time. Pamphlets were dismissed as mere paper. Protests were ridiculed as disruptive. Even Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. were accused of being unrealistic dreamers. What critics often fail to see is that movements take time to mature, and their tools evolve along the way. Hashtag activism, despite its flaws, has proven capable of not only raising awareness, but also shaping policy and shifting culture. Still, the backlash is real and often dangerous. Activists and repressive regimes face surveillance, arrests, and even violence for what they post online. A tweet can become evidence in a courtroom. A hashtag can become a threat to those in power. The digital square, for all its openness, is not a safe space for everyone. This reality reminds us that activism, whether in streets or screens, has always carried risk. The backlash also reveals something deeper: the immense power hashtags truly hold. If they were meaningless, no one would bother to suppress them. If they were weak, governments would not fear them, corporations would not study them, and trolls would not attack them. The very fact that hashtags provoke such resistance is proof of their historical significance. They are the pamphlets and speeches of our age, and just like those before, they challenge the status quo in ways that cannot be easily ignored. Yet perhaps the greatest backlash is not from governments or critics, but from the very structure of social media itself. Algorithms, designed to prioritize profit over truth, often determine which hashtags trend and which disappear. Activists must fight not only against injustice, but also against the hidden forces of digital platforms that reward sensationalism over substance. In this sense, history is repeating itself. Just as newspapers once relied on powerful publishers and broadcasters on wealthy networks, hashtag activism depends on platforms controlled by a handful of tech giants. The struggle for free and equal voices continues, only in a new arena. But even in the face of backlash, hashtag activism has endured. It has adapted, just as activism always has. When censored, it finds new words. When hijacked, it finds new strategies. When dismissed, it proves itself in action. Hashtags are not fragile. They are resilient, precisely because they belong to everyone. Each new challenge only confirms their role in shaping the history of our time. The story of power and backlash is, in truth, the story of activism itself. For every step forward, there is resistance. For every voice raised, there is an attempt to silence it. Yet, history shows us that movements born of genuine passion and justice rarely die. They evolve, they grow, they endure. Hashtag activism is no different. It is not perfect, but it is powerful. It is contested, but it is unstoppable. And its struggle with backlash only cements its place as one of the defining forces of modern history. History is not written only in books and monuments. It is written in the voices of people, in the struggles they wage, and in the symbols they leave behind. In the 21st century, one of those symbols has been the hashtag. What began as a simple tool for categorizing conversations has transformed into a cultural marker, a historical document of our times, and a weapon of activism that transcends borders. As we look at the legacy of hashtag activism, we see not just fleeting trends, but echoes of voices that will be remembered as part of humanity's larger story. To understand its legacy, we must first ask, What has hashtag activism already achieved? From the Arab Spring to hashtag MeToo, from Black Lives Matter to climate strikes, these movements have reshaped how history is recorded. Traditional history often came from the top, from kings, generals, and politicians. But hashtags flip that narrative, giving ordinary people the power to write their own history in real time. When a protester tweeted from Cairo, or when a survivor of harassment shared her story under hashtag MeToo, history was no longer just observed. It was experienced, documented, and amplified by the very people living it. This democratization of history is one of hashtag activism's greatest legacies. Future historians will not rely solely on official speeches or government archives. They will sift through hashtags, digital testimonies, and viral movements to understand what people truly felt, feared, and demanded. For the first time in human history, we have a record of collective emotion on a global scale, an archive not of rulers, but of voices. Yet legacy is not only about documentation, it is about transformation. Hashtags have not simply recorded events. They have shaped outcomes. Governments have fallen, laws have changed, and cultures have shifted because of digital movements. The hashtag MeToo movement forced industries worldwide to confront harassment. Hashtag Black Lives Matter reshaped discussions about race and justice across continents. Hashtag Fridays for Future mobilized a new generation to demand urgent climate action. These are not minor ripples. They are tidal waves of change that will define this century. At the same time, the future of hashtag activism raises complex questions. If hashtags are the new symbols of activism, what happens when the platforms that host them are controlled by corporations? If algorithms decide which voices are amplified and which are hidden, can we truly call it democratic? The legacy of hashtag activism may depend not only on the movements themselves, but also on how society navigates the power of digital gatekeepers. Another question is endurance. Will hashtags fade into the background of history, remembered as a short-lived trend, or will they evolve into something even more powerful? History offers clues. The pamphlets of the Enlightenment, once dismissed as cheap paper, now sit in museums as artifacts of revolution. The songs of the civil rights movement, once sung on the streets, are now studied as cultural treasures. In the same way, hashtags may one day be seen as the anthems and pamphlets of the digital age, symbols that capture the spirit of a generation. The future may also see hashtag activism merge with new technologies. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, and decentralized platforms may allow movements to bypass corporate control, ensuring voices cannot be silenced. Virtual reality may one day bring protests to our living rooms, allowing people anywhere in the world to experience the streets of Cairo, Hong Kong, or Minneapolis as if they were there. The tools will evolve, but the spirit, the drive to be heard, to fight injustice, to unite, will remain timeless. Critics may continue to call hashtag activism shallow, but history has a way of proving critics wrong. What matters is not whether activism looks traditional, but whether it creates impact. And the truth is, impact has been undeniable. Hashtags have given courage to the silenced, visibility to the invisible, and urgency to causes that were once ignored. That is legacy. But perhaps the most powerful legacy of hashtag activism is a reminder that history is not distant. It is happening now. In every trending hashtag, we see the seeds of tomorrow's history books. In every viral movement, we see echoes of revolutions past. Hashtag activism is not separate from history. It is history in motion. As for the future, one truth stands clear. Activism will never again be confined to streets and speeches. It will live in the digital realm, where voices can rise faster, travel farther, and unite more deeply than ever before. The power of hashtags is not that they solve everything, but that they make silence impossible. In the centuries to come, when future generations look back on our era, they may not just remember presidents or wars or treaties. They may remember the hashtags, the collective cries of a connected humanity demanding justice, equality, and change. From hashtag MeToo to hashtag Black Lives Matter, from hashtag Arab Spring to hashtag climate strike, these words may echo across history as symbols of a people who refuse to be silent. And so, the story of hashtag activism is not ending. It is only beginning. Its legacy is being written even now, in tweets, in posts, in digital echoes across the world. And its future belongs to all of us, because every time someone presses a button and joins a cause, they are not just posting, they are participating in history. They are proving that the power of words, amplified by millions, can still move mountains. Hashtags are more than symbols. They are the ink with which modern history is being written. And that, perhaps, is their greatest legacy. As the echoes of revolutions past remind us, change is never silent. It is shouted, sung, and written across time. Today, it is written in hashtags. Hashtag activism has proven that a symbol can unite voices across continents, challenge injustice, and force the world to listen. It is not a replacement for action. It is the spark that ignites it. And one day, when future generations look back at this era, they may not only remember wars, leaders, or treaties. They will remember the hashtags, the collective cry of humanity demanding justice, freedom, and change. Because history is not just made by the powerful. It is made by all of us every time we dare to speak. So, the next time you type a hashtag, remember, you're not just posting, you're writing history. If you believe in the power of voices, in the power of history written by the people, make sure to subscribe to History Vault. Together, let's uncover the stories that shaped our world and the ones being written right now.